All right, and for our another edition of Speaking of Data, we're very happy to welcome James Kobielus. He is the Senior Director of Research for Data Management at TDWI. Jim is a veteran thought leader, industry analyst, consultant, author, and speaker on analytics and data management. And over the past 3 decades, Jim has held analyst positions at Futurum Research, Wikibon, Forrester Research, Current Analysis, and the Burton Group. He also served as Senior Program Director, Product Marketing for Big Data Analytics for IBM, where he was both a subject matter expert and a strategist on thought leadership and content marketing programs targeted at the data science community. At TDWI, Jim focuses on data management, which encompasses database platforms, data governance, data integration, master data management, data ops pipelines, and more. Welcome, Jim. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you for reading my bio without getting breathless.
Well, there's a lot to it because you're an important man. But let us get into the topic for today. I think we're going to talk about modernizing data governance. And I think a great place to start for me, especially, but also for those listening, is how would you define data governance? What is it?
Yeah, I mean, data governance is really in many ways at the heart and center of data management generally. And data governance is a huge area in its own right with many sub-disciplines and so forth. And various industry observers, various analysts, various solution providers define it in different ways. But here's the heart of how TWI covers data governance. Well, what is data governance? Well, it's not a specific product. It's not a specific tool. Rather, it refers to the practice, the enterprise practice of ensuring that your core business asset, your data, it's the practice of ensuring that your business data remains fit for use. And so what do I mean by fit for use? Well, what do you use data for? Well, you use it for reporting, use it for analysis, for visualization. Of course, you use it for transactions. You use it for everything. So every business uses data, and the data that you use to run your business on, well, what is fitness? What's the fitness of data? You want it to be trustworthy first and foremost. You want to know that your data is the latest and greatest, that it's correct, that it's consistent across all the places where you are maintaining it, so that if you have copies of data, that they're all in sync with each other. You want it to be compliant with all the relevant mandates and laws and regulations. The compliant in terms of its format, in terms of how particular concepts or semantics, as they're often called, are expressed in the way the data is formed and so forth. So you want your data to be trustworthy. You want it to be merged and cleansed and so forth and augmented in a standardized way so that the people relying upon it, which is everybody in business, you have the best data for anything you want to do with it to drive business decisions and business processes. That's the core of what we mean by fit for use data. But it's more than just trustworthiness of the data. The fitness of data for use is also associated with its relevance. It's not just that your data is the latest and greatest, but it's actually useful for the intended purpose, so that you have the relevant financial data to serve the financial analysts in your organization. You have the relevant marketing data to serve, marketing campaign specialists and so forth. So the relevance of data really in many ways is determined by its applicability to the things that they do. And many businesses organize their data warehouse and data marts and so forth in terms of subject areas or domains. They call them finance data, customer data, et cetera. Relevance is all about making sure that each of those marts, which may be a physical database or just a partition in a larger database, that those are organized properly, that the data has been tagged and classified correctly. So there's trustworthiness and relevance of the data, but there's also a third dimension to fitness that we call out. In fact, we recently published a data governance maturity assessment guide. In fact, we have in market right now a TDWI primary research survey related to data governance maturity, and I urge our listeners to check that out and hopefully respond to it. And the third aspect of fitness is, after trustworthiness and relevancy of the data, is actionability. And what does actionability mean? Well, it means a lot of different things. It's easy to access and consume, but also a big part of it is that the data is framed in the context of standardized business glossaries and definitions. In other words, the data is comprehensible to its intended users in a standardized way. That's why business glossary management is a core aspect of data governance infrastructures and practices. So when you ask what is data governance, it's all of that. It's the practice of ensuring that the data remains trustworthy, relevant, and actionable. And I'll also indicate what data governance is not, or really what's data governance sort of neighbor to or adjacent to. It's very similar but distinct. Well, what I've been describing just now is data, what we often call stewardship and curation of the data. There's also data security. Data security is very important. It's making sure that it's accessed only by authenticated and authorized individuals, and that it's encrypted, and so on and so forth. Data governance is fitness for use of the data. Data security makes sure that the data access and the controls around that data are in accordance with your security requirements and mandates and policies and so forth, so that the data is only accessible to the people who are entitled to use it. There's also data protection, which is backup and recovery, disaster recovery, which makes sure that the data is available for your use. Let's say there's a ransomware attack. If you have a backup, you can, and the backup hasn't been compromised, the backup can be put into service quickly so you're not down. So there's data protection, which is very important, which is distinct from data governance. There's data security, which is very important, which is distinct from governance. Because governance, like I said, is all about ensuring its fitness for use of the data.
Well, that's very important. I think that that distinction that you made at the end there, I think will be very helpful for everyone, because it is such a broad topic, data governance. And I think a term like governance as well lends itself to be more broadly used than I think the actual term is intended to be used. So, okay, we have the basis now. We understand what data governance is. How do you know what the chief metrics for success for data governance would be?
Right. Well, I've spelled them out. It's trustworthiness, it's relevancy and actionability. And the way to measure these things, well, many enterprises use data stewardship, data governance tooling that is able to, in real time, roll up the success of your data stewardship practice in terms of the correctness of the data, the completeness of the data, the degree to which the data is current, and so forth. So success metrics of data governance, in other words, stewardship to ensure trustworthiness, it's all about the C's. It's currency, it's compliance, it's correctness, and so forth. And quite often, usually, organizations have dashboards that are an aspect of essentially business intelligence, with visualizations and reports and so forth, to not only see trends over time in all these key dimensions of data governance, success, but also to look for anomalies in terms of bad data or inconsistent data, and then to use those analyses and those the visualizations and so forth to trigger response workflows, so that the relevant data stewards or data managers are able to then correct the problem with the bad data. There may be, for example, maybe 4 discrepant versions of a customer's record, you need often a human data steward to come in and examine and determine which, if any of those, is correct, and they determine the extent to which the others need to be corrected, and also to determine the extent to which they need to be merged into a common record, a master record as maintained within a core repository like your data warehouse. So the success metrics are, of course, like I said, trustworthiness, relevance, and actionability. And the metrics need to be rolled up within dashboards that are available to the people, both business people and the IT people who are responsible for data stewardship as a real-time operational practice, to not only monitor the fitness of the data, but to maintain that fitness ongoing in real time, so that ultimately downstream, the people who are accessing the data from within their business intelligence environment or any other application always know that they have the latest and greatest and best data to make the best decision. Because ultimately, the real success metric of data governance is your data kept at its very best at all times, so that you're always making the best possible data-driven decisions. So it's a business metric. Are you making the best decisions from the best data at all times?
Well, I think that's really obviously very important for any business, regardless of even size. Is, the amount of success must be limited or easily measured by the data governance and the resources that you have in place to help manage that. So because the topic is modernizing data governance, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of things change within data governance over the years that you've been in the industry.
Right.
What are we seeing as far as trends that are driving this modernization these days?
Right. In fact, I've been covering data governance for the bulk of the last 2 decades. So what modern means now really is things I wasn't seeing, let's say 10, 15 years ago, that are now at the center or becoming part of the center of this discipline of data governance. Okay, for starters, for example, data quality has always been the heart of data governance, trustworthiness of the data. What we've seen in the past several years is that there are new types of data that are becoming from new types of applications, like on the Internet of Things, edge computing, mobile devices, social media, and so forth, that enterprises ingest and store and use to build applications and so forth and run the business on. A growing range of data types, ranging from unstructured files to structured data, need to coexist within your data management environment and need varying degrees of governance and controls. Some things, for example, you're monitoring social media, you don't need necessarily as a business to govern, have a core master value of a tweet, but you do need to have, but you do need governance over some types of unstructured data, for example, coming from your industrial machines that have sensors on them, smart sensors, and are putting out operational data in real time. So you need, on some level, with IoT, Internet of Things data, to have some degree of strong governance and monitoring over the quality of that data, because you're running a business on that. That gives you a sense for the types of new types of data that organizations are saying, hey, we need to evolve our governance practices so that we have a standard repository to store this data in. So we have a standard schema for this sort of data. So we have data stewards who are assigned to make sure that the latest and greatest of such data is maintained, so on and so forth. So there's new data types of all sorts all the time. New platforms. Cloud has come along in a big way in the last 10 years. And so most enterprises now cloud computing, whether it be private or public or hybrid or multi-cloud, cloud platforms are the core data platforms in most organizations now, and your data governance, increasingly those workloads, and those are huge workloads in terms of data governance, in terms of ingestion, transformation, ETL, cleansing, augmentation. That's happening in cloud platforms that are scalable and so forth. So more and more organizations are running their data governance in the cloud, first and foremost. Democratization, what that means, democratization of data and analytics, is that more end users are using self-service data analytics tools to do all manner of really sophisticated analytics and data science. And they need the latest and greatest data, or they should be provided or required to use the latest and greatest data to build and train their machine learning models and so forth. So the upswing in democratized self-service data analytics requires strong controls and governance on the data that's being used, and on these developers, on these analysts' ability to store the results of their work back to core enterprise repositories. So there needs to be, and there is increasingly, data governance that is being used to ensure that as you start to have tens to hundreds to thousands of people doing data science in your business, they're all working from a common version of business data. That you don't have these so-called what used to be called spread marts, where everybody had a spreadsheet and everybody's version of the same data got out of sync. More organizations are saying, no, we can't allow the data to get out of sync, but we want to provide our users, our knowledge workers, with the ability to build complex and sophisticated analytics more or less on their own. So that's a big theme as well. Democratization is requiring new types of governance. Rise of new data leaders. The chief data officers of the world now really in many ways are increasingly running the show in data management, and they increasingly are the ones tasked with running the data governance and data stewardship practices, or setting the policies and so forth surrounding all of that. Also, we see increasingly that organizations are productizing their data analytics assets. So on some level, chief data products officers are becoming part of the overall C-suite. And so when you're monetizing your data and analytics assets, there's a strong need for quality controls at the very heart of like making sure that as you build, like say intelligent, like conversational AI digital assistants based on your data and your machine learning models, that only the best data and only the best machine learning models are being used for these initiatives. So the chief data products officers of the world are sitting around a virtual table setting these policies. New platforms have come into the stack for data governance over the years. It used to be data governance was fundamentally just data quality management, master data management, and the like. Those are still at the core of the practice, but data catalogs have become an important place for searching and curating and managing data and machine learning models within a broader governance practice. But also we see a growing range of tools like data lineage and impact analysis tools and business glossary management tools have come to the core data governance stack that many enterprises are deploying. Roles like data curator have become big. The data curator is essentially a subject matter expert who, as I indicated earlier, his job is to tag and classify and categorize data and recommend it for a particular end user, a particular business domain, to make sure that it's easier for them to find the data they need, to make sure that that data is trustworthy and so forth. And so the data curators of the world, that role and similar roles have become an important new trend. But also, one last thing, there's a broader scope to data governance now than there was even 10 years ago. There's data governance and there's analytics governance. And the analytics governance, the phenomenon is slightly larger than data governance. It's strong governance not only over the data, but over the machine learning models and deep learning and AI applications and algorithms and libraries that are being used to extract value from data. So we see more enterprises broadening their governance initiatives to encompass analytics governance. And a lot of that's within the context of data literacy campaigns to make sure that as end users throughout business are trained on data and analytics, and they're sensitized to the need to maintain good practices in data governance, also to maintain good practices in analytics governance in terms of making sure that as they become self-service data scientists, that they are using standard practices for version control and so forth over the models that they build and deploy. So in terms of modernization, as you can see, there's a broad range of trends here that we're seeing coming to the forefront.
Yeah, that I mean, clearly a lot has changed, and a lot continues to change. I think that's one of the most exciting aspects of this industry is that there is no finish line, and every time we think we get a little closer to what might be a finish line in one part of the industry, somebody else continues to push that down the line a little bit further. Something that I'd like to bring up is like the concept of maturity. So. What are like what would be the criteria for enterprise maturity in modern data governance?
Right, right. Maturity of an enterprise practice is always, of course, a moving target. Is what is the best practice at this point in
Mm-hmm.
time for this set of capabilities? We TDWI Research, we have published, as I indicated, a data governance maturity assessment guide, and I invite our listeners to download it and also to take the self-assessment survey we have up there. And in fact, Fern Halper and I will be speaking on this very topic at the executive program that we're doing at the end of November. It's a virtual event. We invite listeners to tune into that. Really, there are 5 dimensions to maturity of a data governance practice. There's organizational commitment. The most mature enterprises in data governance are ones that have executive level support. Maybe it's a chief data officer, maybe it's the chief information officer, but somebody at that level sponsors and supports and funds data governance practices, such as designation of data stewards, both at the business level, in the various business domains like finance and marketing, but also at the IT level. And also very much is behind setting up policies that are enterprise-wide for data governance in all of its manifestations. That's an important facet of organizational commitment, which is the first dimension of maturity, enterprise-wide. Processes, really data governance processes that are well thought out, that involve business and IT people. The business people are the ones who own the data, as it were, and set the standards or policies governing, say, how financial data is managed. If there's discrepancies, say, among financial records, they're the ones who are tasked with resolving those discrepancies so that then the best data for a given record is then stored in a master repository, a so-called single version of truth. Often that's a data warehouse. So there's processes that are very important, that are robust processes that can be scaled as new data sources, new data types come online, and are extensible. So over time can evolve to absorb new roles that might be necessary for robust data governance, like to bring data curators into the mix, or data product managers for that matter. So it's really processes that are extensible as the organization's own data governance requirements change and evolve. The third dimension after processes is accountability. That there is a clear line of accountability for data trustworthiness, data relevance, data quality in general within the organization. As I indicated earlier, stewardship, data stewards are the core operational function that's responsible for data governance, for ensuring the quality of the data that you maintain in the master repositories. That there's a clear responsibility, accountability, that metrics are kept, and that not only the data stewards are held responsible for any lapses in data quality along any of the key dimensions, but also the end users are also held accountable if they are using bad practices in terms of allowing the data that they manage to get out of sync or out of standard with corporate policies. So there's a clear accountability across the organization, across the enterprise. Everybody is responsible for ensuring that data stays high quality, stays relevant, stays actionable. Number 4, assurance and impact. Essentially, that's the metrics. Every organization should have an ongoing program of reporting and dashboarding of the metrics governing how well they're doing on all the dimensions of data governance, so that it's clear everywhere that when the organization is doing well in what area and when they're not doing well, because everybody shares a common, it's often known as increasingly as observability. You all share a common observability platform looking into the various dimensions of data quality, et cetera, across the organization. And last but not least, in terms of maturity, it's tools and platforms. And that's a catch-all for a huge deepening stack of solutions that increasingly automate more of the functions of what's called the data ops pipeline: data ingestion, data transformation, data cleansing, augmentation, and so forth. Because organizations sit upon a huge and growing stream of data. Human beings increasingly are beside ourselves trying to keep up with all this. You need automated tooling to go and do profiling of the data to determine to what extent it is out of conformance with the standards that you set for it. You need automated tooling many organizations have it, to correct the data, to match and merge it into a master record, and then to deploy it into your data warehouse. You need automated tooling to look for discrepancies and set up automated workflows so that the relevant data stewards and others get in the action right away to fix any data problems before they become showstoppers and so forth. There's a lot of automation capabilities that are baked into a mature data governance platform. But also augmentation. In other words, augmentation refers to tools that enable data stewards to do their jobs more effectively. Observability, dashboards, and self-service tools that enable human beings stay on top of the issues, but also be proactive in looking for trends that may be indicative of future issues, so that they, as individuals and as teams, because data stewardship, data governance is really a team effort, as teams, they can work effectively together to keep everything in line. So augmented tooling to serve teams of data governance professionals are a critical part of the maturity picture.
Well, that's fantastic. And I think you touched on a wealth of topics there that we could possibly drill down in much further,
Yeah.
Which I'm sure we might be able to get to on this podcast in upcoming episodes. But, Jim, I think you touched on so much. There is one last question I'd like, and I think our audience will gain a lot from asking this of you. What would be the principal steps that TDWI would recommend for enterprises in their journey to modern data governance?
Right. They're spelled out within the data governance maturity assessment guide, but I'll just net out the high levels. Number 1, assess your enterprise's maturity level in data governance. Take our checklist and then score yourselves along these lines. Figure out what the deficit is for your organization in terms of to get to advanced or visionary maturity, which is the highest level. Figure out how you're going to get there. And how do you do that? Well, first of all, you need to have within your organization a sustainable enterprise practice for data governance. Like I said, executive level support, you need business unit level data stewards and so forth, who do this as a core part of their jobs. In other words, managing data governance practices and workflows. Instill a culture of respect and literacy surrounding data governance. within the broader data literacy push within your organization, make sure that instruction on best governance practices is included, so everybody is aware of the need for all of this, even those who are not data stewards per se. Everybody needs to be aware of this. Adopt automated tooling, often machine learning driven automated tooling to manage your growing data governance workloads within your organization. Establish and also implement team-based collaborative data governance tooling to enable the data stewards at the business and IT level to collaborate with data curators and others on all the workloads that are necessary to stand up and maintain a strong data governance practice, but also an environment that provides strong observability over the metrics in real time, so that everybody is up to speed on how well the entire organization is doing at a high level and on every low level in terms of data governance, so that when quality issues crop up or the data starts to become become non-compliant with whatever mandates are placed upon it, everybody's aware of it. Nobody can hide it. Responsibility is there. And that's really the heart of maturity in data governance. Everybody owns it, and everybody has a stake in fixing problems before they become problems. And that's it.
Well, that was fantastic, Jim. I really do appreciate your time here today. I know that we could go on and on about this topic as you are the expert, but I know that we'll also have an opportunity to have you back on this podcast coming up very soon as well. So thank you so much for your time. If people wanted to engage with some of your most recent reports or information that they can find on TDWI, what would you recommend that they tap into?
Yeah, well, as I indicated, the Data Governance Maturity Assessment Guide is up, and I recommend our readers or listeners to check that out. Also, a few months ago, we published a practitioner survey of data quality managers, and that's up as well in the TDWI research portal. Those are a good place to start, and yeah, that's about it right now.
Terrific.
Oh, yes, of course, the executive program at the end of November, Fern Halber and I are speaking on the results from our survey under the Data Governance Maturity Guide program. So that's coming fairly soon.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for your time. It was an enlightening conversation, and look forward to having you on again soon.